x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about coterminal angles. And coterminal angles are an idea that there's more than one angle when I am talking about this line right here. What I mean is that I could, this is the terminal side of the angle. We always start on the positive x-axis. So if we start on the positive x-axis, this is 30 degrees in the positive direction. So when we travel this way, counterclockwise, then that would be 30 degrees. But there's another way to measure that angle. If I wanted to measure that angle going in the clockwise direction, going in this direction, that would be a negative measure. And so there's a couple different ways to do this. One is just to add up how far I'm traveling. I've traveled 30 degrees in the negative direction here. I've traveled from here to here is negative 90 degrees. From here all the way to this side is negative 180. From here all the way to here is negative 270. And then I could just add these on. And what this is, it's not just 30 degrees, it's also negative 330 degrees. So terminal means where the angle ends. So here is, I always start on the positive x-axis. And if I went in this direction, the positive direction, counterclockwise, it was 30 degrees. But if I went counterclockwise, it was negative 330 degrees. But there's other angles that occur here as well, because it could be the fact that I went around more than once. And if I go around more than once, I'm going to erase these arrows here so we can see what's happening. I could travel starting on positive x-axis, travel all the way around, and then end up here. And so essentially what I've done is I've made a 360 and then I've gone 30 more degrees. So 30 degrees is coterminal with negative 330 degrees, but it's also coterminal with 360 plus 30. So 360 plus 30 is going to be 390 degrees. And that's what coterminal means. Coterminal means all these angles terminate, end at this line right here, and this line is 30 degree angle, negative 330 degree angle, and a 390 degree angle. Now I'm going to spend more time with the negative angles than going around more than once, because going around more than once we can just add 360. We can also talk about these in terms of pi. And so if this was negative 330 degrees, if I look 330 degrees, that's 11 pi over 6. That means in radians, this was pi over 6. But if I went this way around, that would be negative 11 pi over 6, since that's synonymous with negative 330 degrees. So we can talk about positive, we can talk about negative, and that's where we're going to spend most of our time. So I'm going to erase this again, and remember, we are always starting on the positive x-axis. And we do this as a commonality so that when we do our work here in the United States and someone else is doing their work in India or Africa or Russia or China or anywhere else in the world, we are all measuring from the same place. So mathematics is going to have this universal idea that all angles are going to start on the positive x-axis. And we'll talk about a couple more angles. Let's talk about this angle right here. We can see that this is pi over 4. But not only is it pi over 4, but I could go, right, pi over 4 is in this direction, positive direction, pi over 4, also 45 degrees. But I could go in the opposite direction. And in the opposite direction, this would be my negative angle. I would start here, and as I would travel in this direction and end up here. I've gone, so negative 90, negative 180, negative 270, and add another 45 degrees to that. So I've gone 315 degrees in this direction. So this is 45 degrees, but it's also negative 315 degrees. And if I look at 315 degrees, so 315 degrees this way is 7 pi over 4. So if I go negative 315 degrees, it's going to be negative 7 pi over 4. So this is negative 315 degrees, but also negative 7 pi over 4. And those are coterminal. So 45 degrees and negative 315 degrees are coterminal. Negative 7 pi over 4 and pi over 4 are coterminal to each other. Let's try a couple of examples of how we would use this. And again, we're just introducing this, so there's larger meaning for what's happening. We're just getting the basics. So let's talk about finding the sign of negative pi over 4. The sign of negative pi over 4. Well, just to recall, we know that we have x, y, where x in the unit circle is cosine, y is sine, and then we do know what tangent is. Tangent is y over x. Tangent is y over x. And then we do have also the reciprocal functions, which we'll talk about in a minute. Because we have the sign of negative pi over 4. Well, we know that we're starting here. And positive pi over 4 would be in this direction, 45 degrees. But that means that negative pi over 4 would be in this direction, 45 degrees. And so we end up here. This is coterminal with negative pi over 4. So I want to find the sign of that. Well, sign is y. So the y value is negative square root of 2 over 2. So it's negative square root of 2 over 2. Let's try that again with another example. So another example would be cosine of negative 2 pi over 3. So cosine of negative 2 pi over 3. Well, 2 pi over 3, our 2 pi over 3 would be going in this direction, just more than 90 degrees, right? Just more than 90 degrees. So negative 2 pi over 3, we're going to go in the clockwise direction, just a little bit more than 90 degrees. So this would be negative 90, and then we would end up right here, and that would be our negative 2 pi over 3. So this would be negative 2 pi over 3. When we measure negative 2 pi over 3, we're talking about cosine. And again, cosine is our x value. So we look at negative 1/2. It's negative 1/2. All right, let's talk about a reciprocal function. We have the secant of negative 7 pi over 4. So the secant of negative 7 pi over 4. When we're talking about negative 7 pi over 4, again, 7 pi over 4 would be past 90, past 180, past 270, all the way another 45 degrees past 270. So we're just going to go do that in the opposite direction, in the clockwise direction. So there's my 90, 180, 270, and we need to go 45 degrees more than that. So 45 degrees would be here. And this is going to be negative 7 pi over 4. So negative 7 pi over 4 is this terminal side. And so we're looking for the secant. Well, if remember, a secant equals 1 over cosine. We know that the cosine here is x, so secant is going to be of negative 7 pi over 4. Right here is 1 over x, 1 over square root of 2 over 2. So we get 1 over square root of 2 over 2. And remember, this fraction bar really means division. So it's 1 divided by square root of 2 over 2. And I'm going to make 1 into a fraction. And then recall that when we're dividing fractions, we can keep the first fraction, 1 over 1, change from division to multiplication, and flip the second, so 2 over the square root of 2. And that gives us 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times square root of 2 is the square root of 2. And I can't leave a radical in the denominator, so what I do is I multiply top and bottom by the square root of 2. And so I get 2 root 2 over 2, square root of 2 times square root of 2 is 2. Those cancel, and I'm just left with the square root of 2. So the secant of negative 7 pi over 4 is the square root of 2. I hope this was helpful. I did this with radians. You can do the same thing with degrees. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much.